let's just start with the very basics. How old were you when you got into golf, and was it always golf? Were there other sports kind of thrown in there?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that is unique to me because I really didn't start playing competitive golf until freshman year of my high school. So that is pretty late for golf. A lot of golfers start when they're 3 or 4 years old. But I started relatively late because I played baseball my whole childhood. So I loved every part of it. Still consider myself a baseball player, to be honest. But golf, it was the fact that I could be super self-accountable for me, on me, and I loved it. And you can travel the world playing golf, so that's what got me into it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I haven't had a lot of golfers on this podcast actually, which I think is so interesting because the mentality of a golfer is so unique. And
Yeah.
we'll definitely get into that, but I'm excited to kind of get to tell your story through the lens of a sport that I don't really cover that much, which is really cool. Which
Yeah.
brings me to what brought you to golf. I mean, was it something about the sport inherently? I mean, baseball and golf are kind of notorious swing sports, but they're not the same
Yeah.
mechanics.
Definitely not the same mechanics. My dad plays golf, so I got into it a little bit just from him. Um, Whenever baseball season was out of season, I would go to the golf course kind of here and there with my dad just to have fun. Because I'm a big outside person. Like it was always fun for me to spend time with my dad outside. But golf was super appealing to me because of the congruencies with life. So the lessons that, what you get in, you get out, the time that you kind of have to put in to require to get where you want to go. Um, but I just fell in love with it, fell in love with the fact that it was a super tough challenge for me. It's a tough challenge for anyone, really. And you can never really perfect it, but you can certainly try. The mechanics with baseball are different, so it took me a while to figure it out. But um, I feel super blessed. I'm a really big competitor, so whenever I would get out there, I would just find a way to get the ball in the hole. So that's kind of where my golf journey kind of sparked from there.
When you start a sport as late as you did, what kind of hurdles were you having to work through? I mean, I'm sure that there were other teammates of yours that were already talking to college coaches, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't make the freshman golf team at my high school, which um, everyone makes the freshman golf team at their high school. So I always had a chip on my shoulder in that regard. But the sheer kind of amount of catching up that I had to do to guys who've been playing their whole life, um, I was at the golf course. I would finish school. I would My mom would probably she had a snack for me right after school that I would eat on the way to the golf course, and I'd be at the golf course till sunset every single day. And I put in so many hours, right? Just a typical athlete. Um, I loved what I was doing. I loved the process of it. The other hurdles were I just didn't know how tournament golf worked. I mean, there's like social golf is super fun if you're going out with some of your buddies or business partners, even, and just kind of whacking the ball around with no real consequences. But tournament golf, every single shot counts. And you have to know which tournaments to play, like where the college coaches, for example, are looking to recruit. Sometimes it's not just local tournaments. You got to travel across the country to play specific tours against specific players. My family knew none of that. So we were just going with the flow, to be honest with you. And I'm super blessed that it worked out.
I mean, you're from Scottsdale, Arizona, right? So
Yeah.
you can play golf year round. It's not like you're in New England where you're
Yeah.
limited on your time. You can literally spend as much time as you want outside. Did that help in that catch up phase?
Oh, totally. Totally. It was It's super grateful to have the courses and the resources around me because you're right. The weather it gets hot in summers, which you just got to suck it up. But it's not like we're snowed in for half of the year, which I definitely use that to my advantage because you have to. I was able to catch up really, really fast with putting in a lot of hours every week, and to play year round was a huge, huge blessing for sure.
When I talk to team sport athletes, they have a very specific perspective on things like teamwork and focus and drive. When I talk to individual sport athletes, they have a very different take on those topics. You've come at this from both perspectives. When you were going from a team sport to an individual sport, what was one of the things that surprised you about the way that you functioned?
Everyone's in it for themselves when in an individual sport. There's no team aspect, right? Because when you compete, you don't compete for the baseball team. You don't compete for whatever the team name is. You compete for your name. Like it's your name on the leaderboard, and there's a lot of pride that comes with that for sure, because it's you are attached to the result, not necessarily the team. Um, that was a huge learning curve for me, and it still is, to be honest with you. Um, I've never really been a big self-centered guy. I've always been very selfless. Just growing up in a team atmosphere, I know how to work in a team environment and not necessarily where everything is just about me, right? I still don't like it. I still don't consider myself an individual like that. Um, so it was different when there's like 100. If the tournament has 150 players in it, there's almost like it's almost like there's 150 teams there, right? Instead of just 10 teams with 15 guys. So the competition increases a lot because everyone's there for themselves, and you just gotta deal with it.
What was your first experience with college recruiting?
It was just sending out emails to coaches. To be honest with you, it was that kind of grind. I remember. Uh, I think it's the summer of your junior year or something like that going into high school for golf where you can formally email coaches. So at that point, I had established myself more in junior golf. I had started to win some tournaments, started to get my kind of ranking in order. So I was able to start emailing coaches, but I didn't really go to the top schools right away because I knew I was super young to it. And in college golf, there are times where freshmen in high school commit, um, for their schools. Like some of the top schools lock up the best players super early. So I was behind the eight ball in recruiting for sure. Um, so I was talking to schools across the country, pretty much anyone who would respond. Um, I would, and the best way to keep recruiting is just to keep playing. You have to keep playing, keep sending in your results. For golf, the golf swing is super important. So you would send swing videos to coaches so that they could see how you play, how you perform, as well as just your score. Um, and then once I started to develop some relationships with coaches and uh, talk to them more over the phone and take some campus visits, that's when things started to pick up.
What is it about the mentality of a golfer that differs from not only team sports, but other individual sports?
A golfer is very technical, I'd say. They're very technical. They're out there by themselves a lot, right? So it's us against us a lot of the times. Like um, you're out there, you know what you're doing better than anyone else ever could. You've lived it, you've breathed it, um, and there's like this self confidence that every golfer has that I'm the best golfer in the world, no matter what, right? Even if the scores might not show it, every single golfer out there believes that they're the best player in that tournament. And if you don't, then you actually have no chance of winning, right? You have to have that inner confidence, that inner chip on your shoulder. I would say golfers separate from other individual sports maybe because of just the direct competition that you get. I mean, you're competing against other guys for sure, but then you're also competing against the golf course, right? You're kind of playing chess against the golf course at the same time as competing against the guys that you're playing with, everyone else in the tournament, because you're trying to beat everyone in the tournament for sure, but you're also trying to play the best rounds, the best tournament, the best shot that you can. And that is directly against the golf course, right? So you have a different set of competition per se than just right off the top of my head, swimmers. Like swimmer, the pool is the same, right? The pool will always be the distance might change, but you are out there in relatively the same conditions every single time. Um, and you're just swimming against the people next to you. Golf, you can play anywhere in the world, right? Any time of the day, different temperatures, different wind conditions, different grass. Like I could go down the list of the different circumstances that change the environment that we compete in. So we have to be very, very adaptable and have confidence in ourselves to make those changes.
How many hours of golf do you think you've played?
Huh. Um, that's a great question. I have no idea. um, just because like some of our tournaments in college will be out there for 10 hours in competition. And then their practice days like 4 hour, probably at least 50,000. At least, yeah. I mean, it just becomes a huge part of who you are and what you do. You have to work very hard to distinguish life outside the golf course. That you have Jonathan the person and Jonathan the golfer for sure. So to answer your question, probably at least 50,000.
When you're playing a sport where so little of the time that you are actually in the experience is spent swinging the golf club, how do you maintain focus? I mean, of those 10 hours, you're probably only swinging a few minutes worth, right?
Correct. It gets very, very tough. And that's something that I've had to work very hard at because you're right. It's very difficult for a lot of people to be there, like locked in every second of 10 hours straight, right? It's not really realistic. So allocating your focus becomes super important because you have to be focused over the ball, not necessarily when you're walking down the fairway, right? It's different types of focus for different people. And it depends a lot on the personality of the player. Some guys are super social and it works to their advantage to be super light, to be talking to everyone walking down the fairway, because then once they get to their shot, they can put everything aside and just be present. I am more of a like when I'm on the golf course, like this is my job, this is what I'm here to do, kind of get out of my way type person. So I I'll be social here and there, I'll be personable, but I also protect my focus because I know that um, I need to. I'm more of a high intensity guy than a lot of other people, so I need to make sure that I'm in the right mindset for hour one compared to hour 10. Right? It's about playing the long game for sure.
When you were looking at getting recruited, was it always St. Mary's? Were there other teams in the mix?
Yeah, so I had never heard of St. Mary's until about halfway through my senior year. Um, no one from my high school had ever been to St. Mary's. I had, so I was the first person from my high school to go there. Um, and I was not not talking to them at all up until like December, January of my senior year. And I had traveled to Vegas to play in a big tournament where kind of some of the uncommitted seniors across the country who hadn't found a school yet to play, still wanted to play college golf. This tournament was to kind of showcase those players and for college coaches to come and recruit, um, to kind of see some of the players who hadn't been taken yet. Um, and I was fortunate enough, super blessed, super grateful to have won that tournament. So out of all the players who were there that week, I finished first. So that opened a huge door for it changed my recruiting for sure. The schools that I was talking to realized that some of the bigger schools were going to start becoming more of a factor. So my my top three schools became St. Mary's, UC Davis, or Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. So I was always going to go to California. Um, that was always my hope, and I'm grateful that St. Mary's worked out. Uh, it's funny because I got off the phone with Coach Hardy, my coach at school right now, and the very first phone call we had, I remember it clear as day. I came in the house after. My mom was like, "How'd it go?" I was like, "Well, I'm going to St. Mary's." Like I could just tell straight from the phone call, um, just from the my coach was a baseball guy as well, so we talked the same way. We understood each other. The competition part. Um, we ended up taking visits to all those places, but it was pretty clear for me that I wanted to be at St. Mary's, and God had it out for me to be there. So I'm grateful that it's worked out.
Were you looking at Catholic universities? I
It's
mean,
something, yeah, it's been that was important to me. It wasn't the determining factor. Um, I think it's extra reassurance and confirmation that St. Mary's was the right school for me because there is a faith-based part of it, which I'm a faith-based person, so those values align, which I'm grateful for every day. Um, but not necessarily. It was just an added perk, I would say.
how many kids were in your high school?
It's a small high school, so my graduating class was around 200, um, and I think there was probably around 900 to 1,000 people total at my high school, um, which makes sense because St. Mary is very, very small school as well. I think we have a total of 2,700 kids, period. So it does give off a little bit big high school vibes, but I guess that's an environment that I'm comfortable in.
Yeah, I was looking at your stats and also just kind of at St. Mary's website. I mean, the campus is beautiful.
It's gorgeous. I love the area. It's a super safe town. You get up there, and anyone who goes to St. Mary's will tell you there's a very special community. And for me, I stepped on campus, it felt like home right away, which not a lot of schools can give because sometimes you feel big school environment, right? You could kind of become a number and not just a person there, which I love that aspect of St. Mary's, especially the athletic department, that you develop very personal um, relationships where you get to know each other, you get to know your professors, you get to know your athletic staff, um, and and it's gorgeous. The weather's perfect year round most of the time. So
What was your first kind of introduction to mental health services? Was it during high school? Was it during that time where you were going to a lot of showcases? Did it
I
not
think
happen until college?
no, to be honest, it didn't happen really until this last year in college, my senior year, I would say. I never really experienced anything like that in high school, um, which I'm super grateful for because everyone's on different paths and journeys, right? My mental health journey just hasn't started till recently. In college, I always knew that there were mental health resources around, but never felt the need to take advantage of anything like that. And it's not the absence of mental health conversations or problems. It's just that um, I had never expressed it in that way, or I had never really gone to therapy per se. I'd never really talked to anyone about stuff that I was going to through. And there's nothing wrong with that. It was just different. I wasn't really looking to get that help. But it wasn't until my senior year where I started to take more of a leadership role in athletics, that I became more and more aware of these resources. And I felt some responsibility to use them as I was kind of advertising other students to. There's the aspects like, what good is a leader if they don't lead by example, right? So you don't want to say, here are these resources, but then suffer in silence as well, right? I took a lot of pride and responsibility in the fact that I can be vulnerable. There's a lot of power that comes in that. It's not a sign of weakness. And taking advantage of the resources that I'm advertising, it was a clear cut fit for sure.
What was your experience with mental health that made you initially seek services?
For me, so my senior year of college so far, so I'm going to be a grad student. Um, my senior year in the fall, I killed it golf wise. I was playing really well, qualifying with the team really well, playing in tournaments. Not as great as I wanted to, but still super solid. I was counting score, contributing factor to my team. So all the signs were there for success, right? I was killing it in school, killing it in leadership, was super involved. But when all of those things went away, and I looked at myself as the person, I was struggling a lot. I was overwhelmed. I was just constantly pursuing like an image or a person that other people thought of me to be, instead of kind of being authentically myself. And that doesn't mean that I was going to change anything that I was doing, because I was loving what I was doing. I just wasn't putting myself first. And that was an eye-opening experience for me, because I had always thought that mental health problems will occur when your life is crashing down, right? But when I was succeeding in every aspect of my life besides looking at myself in the mirror, right? That was a eye-opening experience for me. And then once our fall season ended and the competition part kind of it lifted off of me, like I was able to take some time to rest, recover. Some of those thoughts that I hadn't really taken time to address became super prevalent, and it was clear that I needed to take some time and some serious thought to work through those.
When you're in an individual sport where the only thing standing between you and success is yourself, and then you have a mental health struggle like you did, I mean, how do you work out? How do you get out of that funk when it's really only you? You're by yourself.
It's brutal. It took me most of the spring semester, to be honest with you. It's you're right. It is tough because you're out there, and when you're playing golf, but you feel like you are fighting against yourself, it's like it's two battles in one, because golf becomes way less of a factor, and then you get upset that golf's not going well, but you're not being fair to yourself because you haven't put yourself in a place to really be as competitive as you want to be. Um, it becomes very, very tough. And that's one of the things that I struggled with in the spring, was being fully authentic, but not really taking time to address some of the things that were going on. Like in January, I was in the gym one day and ended up breaking my inner ear bone in the gym, which super strange injury, I know, but it's like every time I would do anything physically strenuous, I would literally like have to lay on the ground for 5 minutes, like deep breathing, feeling like I would pass out because my heart rate would jump up, blood pressure was crazy. And thankfully, it actually didn't happen when I was golfing, but it created a lot of mental doubt, a lot of mental confusion. Like, what is going on? Is there something wrong with me? Like, I know I can easily do twice this weight on any day of the week with my eyes closed, but now it's like I'm not able to do this right now. Like, what's going on? So it took a month and a half for us to realize what had actually happened. Um, and the uncertainty that comes through injury, through going through some of those mental thoughts that I was going through, those feelings, emotions, it was a whirlwind for sure. It felt like everything was crashing down. And it got to a point in the spring, I had to call my coach up and I was like, hey, I just need a week off. Like, I need to go home. I need to figure out, first off, what's wrong with my ear, um, why this is happening. But like, I need to get away from golf. I need to get away from school right now just to figure, like, get back to me. I need to hit that reset button. Um, so fighting against yourself while having to compete, because the season's going to keep going, right? Season doesn't stop. Um, that's one of the hardest challenges that you can do, because most of the time you can't just, hey, I'm going to take a week off. Like, I'm super blessed that my coach gave me that opportunity, but um, it comes down to putting yourself first and realizing that I'm more than an athlete, that I'm more than my successes, I'm more than some of the learning lessons that I've gone through. I don't really believe in the word failure, because I believe that everything works for our good in the long run. Therefore, nothing ever is a failure, right? If something doesn't happen how you want it to, it's a blessing, because it's a redirection, or you're supposed to learn a lesson that you need in the long run. So I've been able to grow in maturity, looking back in deep reflection of what's been happening the last, or what happened this past year. And I'm grateful for everything that I've gone through.
What resources do you think that every athletic department should have on hand?
I think an in-person, sport specific or athletic specific, um, I'm not sure if it's the therapist or psychiatrist or psychologist is the right, which profession is the right profession there, but I think an in-person resource is crucial, because student athletes will be hesitant to reach out online, will be hesitant to do some of that other stuff. I think that virtual resources are still essential, because for some people who don't want to take that physical step, it's important for them to be able to still get help while kind of staying in their room if they need to, while staying by themselves. It's important to be able to get help wherever you need to get help. So, in person, virtual mental health people is crucial. I think that it's also vital for our athletic departments to have mental health resources where student athletes are already looking. So, like, on the Instagram accounts per se, for the athletic Instagram accounts, it's so easy nowadays to have those story highlights, right? One of those should be mental health resources, because student athletes are already going to the athletic Instagram account to see what's going on, to catch up with their teams, to see their friends. And if they know in the back of their head that they've seen a mental health resource there, they're probably going to be much more likely to utilize it, because they know where to go to find the help that they're looking for. And a lot of the times when I've come across other student athletes, even from other schools, the people in leadership don't know where to look. And that's a huge problem, because if these are the student athletes who are representing their school at conferences, are vocal leaders in their athletic department, and they're not entirely sure what resources they have or where to go to find them, the classic cut, good student, really good student athlete who's just focusing on their life is going to have no chance. Like they're not going to know where to go. So the availability of the resources and the location of the resources, I would say, is something that we can improve and move forward with.
I feel like in nearly every episode of this podcast so far, self-image has come up. And we inevitably kind of snowball into the impact of social media. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it somewhere in this gray area of centralism? When you're looking at availability of resources, making sure that your athletes know how to access them, how can individuals and athletic departments capitalize on this youth that is currently trying to figure out how to access these resources?
We just have to continue to use social media for good, I would say. I think that it's the most important resource that we have because it's one that everyone already uses. You don't have to do anything new to put mental health resources on Instagram, on Twitter, even on websites. I mean, it's everyone is already established in using using social media, which is three-fourths of the battle, to be honest with you. Like to get everyone in one central location, a lot of times in person, right? If it's just to meet as an athletic department for our beginning of the year barbecue, right? It's tough to get everyone there. But social media, everyone's got an Instagram account already. Like the platform has already been established, and shifting our focus into how to best use and capitalize on that platform is where so much good can happen. There's so much potential. I personally think that social media is a positive resource. Probably pretty clear from how I'm talking about it now, just in how I use my own social media as a voice for vulnerability, voice for courage. It's important to, as you mentioned, self-image, put out the most authentic version of yourself. And that doesn't mean that you can't show only the best parts of you, because you should. I mean, you should want to have the best image possible. You should want to pursue your best your best self, and you should be able to post about that journey. Uh, but you shouldn't ever have to fake it, right? You shouldn't ever have to feel pressure to conform to a certain ideal, a certain image, a certain stereotype that a lot of student athletes might fall into because of the expectations of other people when it comes to what a student athlete looks like. Um, a lot of the times, it's this perfect kid per se that is a role model in their local community going off to college, right? Everyone looks up to them. They're role models. And when you get to an environment where every single person is like that, it can become very tough. Like you realize that maybe back home, for me in Scottsdale, maybe I was someone that everyone looks up to, right? In my local area. But at St. Mary's, I've got 11 other guys on my team that have had that same past experience, right? That's not what separates me anymore. It's a huge part of who I am, and posting about that is awesome. But posting about, how teamwork works, how some of the personal journeys that I've gone through with, whether it be mental health, certain friends, um, that's awesome because every student athlete is going through the same exact thing, whether they're willing to talk about it or not. And when I use my social media to be vulnerable, talk about my experience, talk about what's been going on, and open up about my authentic self, the reception was so awesome. Like everyone everyone in my community um, was appreciative, was grateful, but also related so much to the words, the expressions, and the message that I was hoping to come across with. Like we are all so much more similar than we are unique, and than we are different. We're all unique in our own way, but talking to one another about that is super important.
So you'll see we have a 3-minute timer counting down right now. Once that ends, Zoom will kick us off. The same link that you got into this one with will open a new conversation. I don't know why Zoom does this. It's weird. But once that timer runs out, we'll just open up a new one and we'll start again. Moving forward, though, with this meeting, why did you feel as though you should share these athlete stories? I mean, why you?
To be honest, it was a calling from God. I would say I get a lot of purpose with it. I since I've been young, I've always been about community service, giving back to those around me. Um, I'm grateful and blessed to have been. I believe I'm just kind of a naturally born leader. It just comes super easily to me, which I never take for granted because there are aspects where it gets tough. It's tough to have tough conversations with people at times, but um, I always remind myself like it's me because it is hard. Like that's why God chose me. Like oh, because someone's story needs to be shared, right? Someone's perspective needs to be brought to life, and they might not necessarily know how to create that platform or where to go. And if I can serve as the person that brings them that platform, the person that kind of allows them to share their story, it brings me so much joy and like so much sense of self-fulfillment because it just it stems from a value of self-respect, a value of each person's story, each person's uniqueness, and that just leads to like human life, right? I mean, you just love life enough to share in that experience with everyone. So that's where the idea of sharing other people's stories and sharing my story has come with because if it wasn't me, then who else, right? And if it wasn't me, then who else?
It was so interesting that the first thing when I asked you why you launched the podcast was purpose, because I literally wrote down purpose. But when we're talking about becoming an outlet, using your platform to give platforms to others, what was it about athlete mental health and currently being in that atmosphere that aided in helping you launch this?
The fact that no one was really talking about it, to be honest with you, I think mental health is growing in athletics. It's become a huge talking point in some of the meetings and some of the executive conversations in college athletics. But mental health isn't just a talking point, right? It's not something to fill a paper with and to fill a conversation. The uniqueness of it is that every single person goes through it and goes through it in their own unique way. And each experience is different, but the value in talking about it and in sharing our experiences is that we can relate to the emotions behind the experience. So I might not be able to relate to a football player at Alabama per se, but I can relate to the anger when a goal doesn't come, when we don't achieve a goal, right? Or the sadness and thinking about life after college athletics, right? Or the curiosity that might come with that life as well. Um, the emotions, like the fact that we can all share those emotions, made it really worth talking about for me. And it goes back to my sense of community being raised, and especially at St. Mary's. Um, we never really had those conversations anywhere. And I wanted to make it a real impact on the lives around me, not just be a student athlete that comes and goes. Right? I want to leave St. Mary's better than I found it. That's just a value that I've always had. Um, whether it be the golf program, whether it be the school, whether it be the athletic department, this is how I'm fulfilling that purpose of leaving St. Mary's better than I found it, or just leaving college athletics or athlete mental health better than I found it, because a lot of athletes don't have the time they feel like they don't have the time to talk about themselves, to talk about what they're going through. But it's one of the best things we can do for ourselves. And it's an important part in our human experience, not just our athlete experience.
When you launched Stories by Student Athletes, what was the reception?
I got a lot of love from it, which I was super grateful for. I had never thought about doing a podcast, to be honest. It never really it never came to my mind. I actually got the idea from someone important in my life. Like it wasn't my idea, but um, they gave me kind of a word, and I took that as a sign, right? That was God definitely telling me like, hey, there's something here that you can do. Like there's an impact that you can make. And I just took it and ran from it and just walked in faith in that sense. I got a lot of people reached out, which was very nice. It was great to feel the love, feel a lot of people might not have known me to be like that or known that I was going through that. But then again, I didn't know that a lot of people were going through something similar than me, right? And to use the platform as the bridge, to use the podcast as a bridge to have those conversations was super rewarding. Um, I remember it clear as day. I just wrote it up I wrote what I was going to say in that first episode about myself just on my laptop. And I still have no idea what I'm doing. I just went into my car. It was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night and just sat there, recorded on my phone in my car. And that was the first episode, like just like that. And um, you just keep going with it, right? You keep moving with the flow. But I've loved every part of it. I've loved the people that I've been able to meet as a result of it. And the conversations that we've been able to have been super impactful and have helped a lot of people already. So I'm grateful for it.
When you become an advocate so outwardly about kind of whatever topic, but specifically athlete mental health, do you find that teammates and fellow student athletes at St. Mary's have gravitated toward you, have been more forthcoming with their own stories since they know that you are kind of a safe space?
Absolutely. I serve and I embrace that role. I embrace that image that might be created with it. I'm not I'm not Jonathan Curran, the mental health guy, right? I'm Jonathan Curran, the friend, the teammate, the role model, the leader, the athlete. Like there's multiple parts of me that I never get caught into a label. But it's great to have other people recognize that I am a safe place. I am a person that they can come to and to have meaningful conversations with. Um, everyone needs that, and it's not everyone's role to serve as that person, but it is mine. I feel like, and I cherish that opportunity to have important conversations with people that I might not have been able to if I wasn't vulnerable myself.
I really like that quote because I mean both of the guests that come on both of you and I's podcasts, there's a certain degree of vulnerability that we as the hosts have to kind of exemplify. I mean, we've started these podcasts because we want to be a safe space for these conversations. When you have athletes come up to you and say, thank you for what you're doing, thank you for the advocacy work that you're doing, how does that make you feel?
It's the most rewarding feeling ever. It makes everything worth it, right? It's fulfilling. It's rewarding. It's um, gratifying. Right? It's all of those words and more. It's one of those feelings that you can't put into words, which is how you know you're doing the right thing, right? And I feel like it's been successful so far because it's been the purpose behind it has been so good. It's not a personal journey for me to whatever, right? It's to really celebrate each student athlete for who they are and the experiences that have shaped them to the person that they are now, not just the athlete that so many people so many people need to rely on. It's to celebrate like what makes us us. That's why it's called stories by student athletes. It's the story behind the person that you see. I mean, it's not that's um, Taylor from softball, right? That's loving friend who I know has persevered through life, right? And I don't know if there's a Taylor on our softball team or not. I just kind of made that up, but um, that's the idea, right? It's to see more than the person, see more than the athlete. Um, and it just goes back to I wear more than an athlete around my wrist every single day. I mean, there's more to me, there's more to us, and that feeling that you can't beat it.
You're so well spoken. I just love it. What do you see the future of this podcast and this platform being?
It will continue to serve as a safe place for student athletes to share who they are, who they want to be, and who they've been. Right? It's not to say to show off the accolades you have as a student athlete, to show off the successes. That all stems as a part of who you are. So that gets celebrated in its own right. But the future is just to keep valuing each story as simply that, like their own unique story. And there's so much significance that can come of that. And once you speak your story, it becomes so much easier to live it, right? To be fully authentic. So the podcast simply serves as a means to an end. The end is a better life, a better mental health space, and a more authentic you. And stories by student athletes will help us continue to have those conversations to bridge the gap in student athlete mental health. That's an integral part of it because I'm not too sure of others. I'm not too sure of many other student athletes who are talking to other student athletes. Even this podcast per se, I'm super grateful for the opportunity to come on, but you're not necessarily like you're not on another sports team right now, right? There's an interesting dynamic there, um, which makes your podcast super unique as well. Um, just different value, right? It's just a different podcast. Um, and it serves as a safe place. That's what it'll continue to be. So I don't care if it never gets another review. The, each story will be told how it wants to be told.
I think the perspective of an athlete, a current athlete talking about these very current athlete topics is really important. And I always feel like there's a space for more dialogue in this area. I think what you're doing is really cool.
Yeah,
Anything
thank you. And
else that you think that I missed about your story, the podcast, anything you want to add? I'm done with my questions.
no, I would just say that one thing that I've bet on recently is the permission to lead. And a lot of my part of my story was waiting to feel that I've earned the right to be a leader, to have that voice, to speak up like from experience. But one thing I guess I would encourage, and I'm grateful for to say, like on your podcast, I'm grateful for this platform and for all the work that you do. There's not, there's never one moment that just automatically qualifies you to be a leader or to be a voice or to be an advocate. It's something that you're born with. It's something that you, everything in your life has developed you to be the person that you are now. And that person is worthy enough, is capable enough to speak up about their experiences, to speak up about an area of change that they may seem fit, because no one else will see something how I see it, how you see it, how they see it. And it's important to say that, because that adds to our shared experiences, and you never need permission per se to lead or to be the person that you want to be. So I guess that's how I would end that.
It's so fun because I have questions prepared every interview. And then at the very end, I always say, the floor is yours. And some of the best parts of each interview come from this period of time. I think it's so fun.
Yeah, it's giving the interviewee, right, the opportunity to say what's kind of been on their heart or on their
Yeah.
mind or on their spirit. And um, your questions were great. I love them, and they definitely do. They serve their purpose for sure, and that's just something else that I wanted to add. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity.